Hello, I am Aussie Villain and welcome to another tutorial for Football Manager 2018. Now the first one that we did was on a sort of a general getting started once you have your new club in Football Manager. What I would recommend is if you haven't watched that yet and you find this helpful, perhaps go back. We just sort of go through generally what it is that you should do to get your feet under the table, I guess. But what we're going to do today is focus solely on tactics, because that is king in the game, and that's what will ultimately determine if you are successful or not. Now, to demonstrate this, I'm going to use a game I've been playing briefly here with Bognor Regis, the wonderfully named Bognor Regis. This is Vanarama South, which is the bottom of the bottom in English football. Certainly that's playable in the game anyway. Now, as you can see, before the season we were predicted to be coming 19th. I think we're 8 games in and we're currently 3rd, 1 point off top. So I think that sort of shows that what I have been doing here, it does work, and it is working with Bognor Regis right down the bottom end of English football. Now, the first thing I think to just get out there is that there is no one tactic that works universally. You see so many people, there's a wonder tactic with Man City and an undefeated tactic with Real Madrid, and no one can beat Barcelona if you use this tactic. Of course not. Look at the players that those teams have. Most tactics are going to be undefeatable with them because it's the players, it's not really the tactics. When you're Bognor Regis, tactics do matter. Now, the first thing that I always think is that defense is king. You need to build from the back, and I think that the best way to do that is you want to have defenders that are strong in the air if possible. You can see here we have jumping of reach of 11, strength of 12, and then if we go over to the other guy here, it's the reverse, jumping reach of 12, strength of 11. Now, that doesn't look great necessarily if you are playing as a Championship Premier League club, but you've got to remember the level we're paying at here. They're relatively good stats for this level. Now, why I say you want to have defenders that are strong in the air is because you can sit deep as a defense if you're up against an attacking striker, and there's no space in behind for them to run into, so everything's in front and the pace is largely nullified. And then the other end to that is that you then have big attacking players that when you get a set piece, a corner, free kick, they can go up the other end and they can then look to nick a goal as well. So that is why I always think that the bigger, taller, strong in the air defenders are always you can do a lot with them that a defender that is not as good in the air, maybe a little bit quicker across the ground. When the opposition get a corner, for example, you're going to be in trouble because you can't jump. And then you're not going to have ultimately that success at the other end as well from corners. Now, what you're going to want to do then, if you're built from the back, you have your big defenders, is you want to try and balance your attack. You want to see where your strengths are and look to use those. Now, remembering if you do have the big defenders, you're sitting deep, there's going to be a lot more of the field open to you to attack into. So I always think you want to look then to go for attacking pacey players. So you see the striker we're using here is a pace of 12, acceleration 13, good finishing 13 as well, and off the ball of 11. They're sort of your key stats that you want your striker to have. Anything above and beyond that is a bit of a bonus. Now, this particular team, I have better wingers than I do fullbacks. You can see they're dribbling 12, crossing 12. So that works, and then it's a similar sort of situation over here. Crossing isn't as good, so we want to look him to be sort of running a bit more than crossing. But again, it's a strong wide player. The other tactics, this is the 4-3-3 that I like to use. And then what you can do from this with your midfield is that if you are playing a team that is possibly better than you, you can look to have somebody sitting in to sort of protect the back four a little bit more. If you are playing a team that you think you are better than, you can always push players forward and be less defensive minded in midfield. So you can play around with that. You could have 2 sitters, you could have 1 sitter, play like almost like a straight line through midfield. You can pick and choose and play around with that. but you ultimately you want to try and make sure that the middle of the field is relatively solid. Now, the other tactic that I like to use, it isn't working so well with this team, so just ignore the lack of familiarity with the positions. But I do like playing with the three at the back sometimes, your two wing backs and then two strikers. Now, what you can do with this is that you can play a lot through the middle, and then if the other team is playing very narrow to sort of prevent your midfield from playing, you have your two wing backs that can then play wide, that you can play out to, that then spreads the field. So if the other team stays narrow, then you have wing backs that are free, can cross the ball in. Or if they then spread out to cover the wing backs, your central midfield has space once again. I still like to play, the bigger defenders sit deeper and have the space to attack into. And again, you can move a midfielder up. You can sit too deep if you are really playing for a result. You do have those options that are there. Now, another thing you want to consider too with your strikers, if we go back to this one so it looks a little bit more like the players know what they're doing. If you have a striker like this guy here who his jumping reach isn't fantastic, you're going to want to make sure that the crosses, when they come in, that you're playing in low crosses. So if you do that here, there it is right there. You can have a mixed float crosses, whipped crosses, or low crosses. So if your striker isn't good in the air, it kind of goes without saying that you want to put the crosses in low. If you have someone who has a jumping ability that is 15 or above, chances are you actually want to float the crosses in to give him a chance to get under it and get some power in the header. Now, one thing you'll want to take into account is the opposition defense. If you have your striker has a jumping ability of, let's say, 14, there's some weeks where that is going to be good and you might want to float the crosses in because he has an advantage over the defenders he's up against. There's some weeks that the defenders are going to be stronger in the air than him, and you're going to actually want to play in the lower crosses as well. So you are going to want to just check what your opposition is to make sure that you're using your strength to counter their weakness, and that's not always going to be the same thing. So then you want to obviously look at how can you exploit the opposition. Now, if we just have a look at some of the games that we've played here. There we go. Let's have a look at this game against Chelmsford, for example. Okay, now you can see here that when we were playing them, they were looking to get the ball out wide and trying to cross it in. Now we sat back, and as you can see, they had more shots than we did, more shots on target than we did, but they scored less. Now, why is that? Because we had strong defenders sitting deep. They could have all the time out there they wanted. When they crossed it in, we could just sit there and just head it away all day. And then because they were playing wide, we tried to play through the middle, because you can't be everywhere at once. You always want to try and find where the space is and exploit it. So that's what we did. They were looking to get the ball wide. We tried to play through the middle. You always want to be looking for the space. You'll see when you're watching the game that sometimes that there will be space in this area of the field. Let's go back to the other tactics screen actually. Sometimes there'll be space here for you. There'll be space. They won't have a midfielder sitting back in that space. So look to play through the middle. Look to get a midfielder into that space. Sometimes they'll play narrow, and often you'll find the space is out the wings. So if that's the case, you want to go here and you want to try and exploit the flanks. If there's space in the middle, exploit the middle. I always find to start, I don't typically like to tell my team to exploit any space. I like to let the game start, see where the space is, and then play into it basically. Now, another thing that you'll want to do with your tactics is, again, you need to be realistic with what your team can do. If you're playing against a team that is very good through the middle, some weeks, if you are better than them, you might be able to just simply put someone back there, keep playing. Keep playing with width, exploit the pitch, and just the fact that there is somebody that's in there is going to nullify their attacking threat through the middle. If you are playing a team that is much better than you, then you might want to consider leaving the guy there and playing narrow as well to give them less space to counter their strength. Likewise, if they're good through on the wings, I might need to look at dropping these guys back because we need that cover. I can never get that to go in this game, but you get the idea. You want to drop them back so that there's that extra cover for your defense. It's just about being realistic at knowing what your team can do and realistically what is your best chance of getting a result in a particular game. Now, like we were saying before with the defenders, if you have these big defenders but you find that the other team has a big striker and he's not going to really hurt you in behind, you might want to look to push your defensive line up. If you do that, knowing that there's not much risk in behind, you can play slightly higher, you can press the ball more, and that may be the way that you find to beat the opposition that you're playing. It's all about, you want to know your strengths, and then you want to be able to use them to pick off the opposition's weaknesses. Now, another thing that you want to consider is if you need to give your attacking players defensive duties. Now, for example, when I use this particular tactic, especially against, say, a 4-4-2, what you'll find is that these guys might be picking up the other team's wide midfielders. If the fullbacks get forward, you then have these guys being outnumbered. So what I'll often do is I will ask my forwards here, go to mark a specific position. So I'll ask the forward on the left to mark the right back, and I'll ask the forward on the right to mark the left back. Now, I'm not necessarily expecting them to stay with them at all times, but what you'll find is that even a lazy forward will kind of make an effort to get back and make sure that the opposition fullback isn't completely opened. And the other benefit to this is that when you win the ball back, you tend to have your strikers out here in these wide positions. So that's naturally spreading the field for when you get the ball, that you have sort of more attacking options and can launch counter attacks effectively. But that's just sort of a by-the-by benefit from it. But the main thing that you're looking for is just to make sure that these fullbacks aren't going to be outnumbered. So whenever you are setting your team up and you're watching the game, just keep an eye on how the opposition is attacking, and if you do need to give these attacking players some defensive duties, I think you'll find that I do actually have these guys set already set to mark the fullbacks, just to make sure that we're not getting overrun in wide areas. So that's the way that I've set my teams up tactically. Now, another thing is with set pieces, you do want to take a little bit of time just to have a look at these, because how many times do you see games won by slack marking at a set piece? Now, with defending corners, I have found what is useful for me is you want to have, obviously, your man markers. Your central defenders, if you look down here, are typically going to be the best for man marking. They're going to have the jumping reach, the strength, the heading, the marking ability. So you're going to want typically your two defenders to be man marking, and then you're going to want, I find, two others to man mark. So you just want to go through your squad, see the others that have the better statistics for man marking from a set piece. Man on each post for a corner, I find, and then I have one person marking zonally the near post, one marking zonally the center of the 6-yard box. I don't worry too much about the back post, because if the ball's going all the way over there, chances are either the keeper's going to get to it, or if we're man marking, anyone at the back post should hopefully be man marked. Now, I like to keep two men forward. I like to have one of my quicker players good on the ball on the edge of the area to anything that gets headed out that he can pick up, and then launch a quick counter attack with another quick player that's there in support of him. I find that you can nick a goal or two through the season just from this. It's amazing how often the ball can sort of get headed out to this guy, and then off you go. Now, when it comes to attacking a corner, my personal preference, I like to whip the ball into the near post, have my two best aerial players, which tends to be the centre backs, because my strikers tend to be the nippier, quicker guys that aren't as strong in the air. Have one of them attacking the near post, one of them looking to flick the ball on, and then get a couple of your better finishers at the back post. So anything that doesn't get headed in at the near post could find its way across to the back post, and then you can have someone there to knock it in. I generally seem to have a good record of scoring from corners, so I find this works. If anybody else has other attacking formations that they like to use from corners, then please leave them in the comments, and we can sort of, as a community, brainstorm and see what works well. But I find this general setup tends to work well for me. And then for the actual free kick set pieces, if you're doing defending a direct free kick, I find 4 men in the wall, the rest man marking, and then always keep a man forward. You just want to make sure that you have that counter-attacking option. And then attack, again, you just want to try and get your best headers forward, obviously your best free kick taker on the ball, and then always keep a few back. You don't want to overcommit forward. But that's from direct, and then from indirect, you want a similar sort of setup. You want your best headers of the ball forward, 3 back, and then obviously your best set piece taker on the ball. From a direct free kick, obviously it doesn't necessarily matter who is forward, because typically you're going to be shooting at goal anyway. I just like to get the centre backs forward just to see if they can nick a goal for me. But as I said, direct free kick, it's generally not going to make too much difference, because usually they will be going for goal anyway. So that's my quick rundown for the tactics. I hope you found it helpful. If you have, please do give me a thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. I'm going to be looking at getting a couple of Let's Plays going. I would like to do one with Aston Villa just for my own personal enjoyment, I guess. And then I'm thinking of doing another one starting at the bottom and trying to, work our way up. Now, I'm not sure what club I want to do this with. I am tempted by Bognor Regis, just because I feel like it is the football team name that only a mother could love. But I am open to suggestions as well. I have wondered about playing as Bradford Park Avenue and try and knock Bradford City off their perch, off their Bradford perch, of course. But again, leave comments of if there is a particular sort of Let's Play that you would like to see me do, and then we can go through it together. I'll use you guys as my director of football. Any signings, we can do Twitter polls, anything like that, and try and come to a group decision as to who we should and shouldn't be signing. So that's it for this week. As I said, please do like, please do subscribe, and you can always follow me on Twitter as well if you like, at AussieVillain. I'll leave that link below as well. So that's it for today, guys. Take care and enjoy your Football Manager, and we'll be back next time with a Let's Play.